Okay, so just a little recap. So we've done your extroversion, introversion, habitual, clear introversion, and we've gone through these facets. We've done your, where are we? Thinking and feeling. Where's your other one? So extroversion and introversion. I think I've lost one. Have I lost one? No, here it is. How you collect data, sensing and intuition. And then how you make decisions based on that information, thinking and feeling. And the final pair is how you orientate yourself in the world. And this is between judging and perceiving. It doesn't mean that you're judgmental. It doesn't relate to perception. So I'll just show the camera.
I think you should show the camera my perfect scores.
Clear. I don't think I've
No
not
such thing
really
as perfect
seen one like this
scores,
before. So as you can see, the yellow column is for perceiving, the blue column is for judging, and Neil has got 5 full purple bars down the side in judging, which is a totally clear preference for judging, which means you prefer decisiveness and closure.
Yes.
Overall. So that's the preference indicator, preferring decisiveness and closure, as opposed to perceiving people preferring spontaneity and flexibility.
No, thank you.
So
I like an itinerary.
there are strengths in both
Of course
and weaknesses in both.
Yes.
So what overall feeling do you get when you see that there?
That I need to be watching out for people who are perceiving types, because we're going to be living a very different lifestyle.
You'll be living a very different lifestyle and world really, and how you,
they might not like the way I like it, and vice versa.
Manage your world, how you go about it, and the way that you would do it. So sometimes a useful analogy that I probably asked you last year in step 1 is, you know, thinking about booking holidays is a typical question, and the preference for people with a judging preference is that they would want to plan ahead and book it in advance and know what they're doing, make a decision, and then they can look forward to it and move on.
I can put my itinerary in Evernote and I know exactly what I'm doing each day.
Now again, remember, this is preference. It doesn't mean to say that you can't do the spontaneity and flexibility, but that would probably feel quite uncomfortable, and it would probably require more energy from you.
And it was interesting because when we talk about the holidays, we got caught many years ago now by the Icelandic volcano when it erupted in dust cloud, and we were in Barcelona at the time, having this lovely, carefully scheduled sort of short break, and the flights were all cancelled, and then we had to come back overland. So you could say, well, that was really spontaneous, well done, but what did I do as part of that? I created a plan on spur of the moment. So I reverted from being spontaneous instantly into doing the planning.
The thing can be a spontaneous change that's enforced on you, but how you deal with that is
so
the
it was
clue.
Planned spontaneity.
Yeah. So I suppose a person with the preference for perceiving would kind of go, oh, well, you know, let's just see what happens and we'll just go with the flow.
No.
Maybe. You know, they'd see it as an opportunity to maybe do something totally different, you know, wake up tomorrow, see, you know, how things take them. So I think it's fair to say that you feel fairly comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable with these results. So just for the viewers, this means that under the preference of judging, which is preferring decisiveness and closure, you have a clear behaviour showing a systematic, orderly, structured approach, and you dislike diversions. You're planful, so future focused, advanced planner, like firm plans. You would show the behaviour of early starting, which we talked about earlier. So you wanted to see these results, right? Motivated by self-discipline, steady progress, late start, stressful. Scheduled, you want routine, make lists, procedures help, and methodical, plan specific tasks, note subtasks, and organised. So all of those things have a real clarity for you. So looking at this, you could, something quite interesting, you could actually look down the opposite of you, down this side. You could see whether or actually even look at these. So if you were casual, you'd be relaxed, easygoing, welcome diversions. Open-ended, you'd be present focused, go with the flow, make flexible plans. Pressure prompted, motivated by pressure, bursts and spurts. Early start, unstimulating, so you'd leave things more to the last minute. Spontaneous, want variety, enjoy the unexpected. Procedures hinder. Emergent, plunge in, let strategies emerge, and adaptable. Now again, it's of course not saying that you can't do some of those things, because you have the ability to learn. And maybe in some jobs or situations you've learnt the ability to do some of those things because you've needed to. And then, of course, when you learn something and you do it time and time again, repeating it, it becomes more familiar. So,
yeah, I think that there's one in there which is the pressure prompted one. So I know in the past I've played with that one to see how it feels leaving things to the last minute. And actually what I've just realised, and I wouldn't have realised it apart from that, is actually the reason I didn't do it was to be more perceiving and more kind of less planful. It was actually to test out how planful I can be. Because I thought if I squeeze the time, let's see if I can be super planful and still achieve it in the short period of time. So actually my motivation, I wouldn't have got this until you showed me this, but my motivation actually wasn't to do that. It was to test how good I am in my head on this side. So
that's interesting, isn't it?
Which I think, like you say, just shows how entrenched in this side I am.
So what, because you're so clear that side, what challenges do you think you might come up against?
Oh, the challenges that I constantly come up against is the value of time. So if, having been really planful, having really created a very tight, because I'm trying to juggle so many projects and so many things, is that if somebody else doesn't toe the line to my time scales, I tend to get quite ratty. Because I think, well, hold on, look, I've planned this. I know that we can achieve it in this time frame, and now you're telling me you're not going to deliver on this timing, or you're going to be late, or actually you're going to see how it goes. Well, I'm sorry, I can't do that, because so I am quite inflexible, if I'm being really honest, when it comes to change. I like the word diversions there, because I was thinking if I was driving in a car and suddenly the road ahead is shut, do I just think, oh, this will be nice because we can take another route that I've never tried before and we'll see where we end up? No, I'm straight to the sat-nav to see how efficiently I can then do the quickest route beyond it.
Or it might be an interesting exploration for you to see if it's even quicker than the time before, because then that's still an ultimate game of getting your plan even better next time. That would be my motivation,
But I can appreciate the inflexibility of it. Because if something crops up, as inevitably it does, and your itinerary has to change, it's not a pleasant thing.
So I'm going to make an assumption here, but presuming if you were working in a team of people and you were the only planner, the only person with preference J, and everyone else with a preference for P, spontaneity, flexibility, what things would you put in place to try and cope with that? I'm guessing that you'd put more plans in place to try and cope with that.
Yes,
or kind
I
of,
would.
What's the word? I can't think of the word, but contingency planning.
Well, I would super plan to the nth degree, and I would be constantly chasing. It would be kind of really trying to keep everybody on track. I'm almost trying to convert people to my way of doing it,
and would you
which isn't really healthy, is it?
Plan for the spontaneity time, so there were pockets of
I think I'd be really, really generous to say that I'd do that. I don't think I'd do that. No, I think what I would be probably so inflexible that I would be trying to get people to convert to my way of doing it.
So that's quite interesting, isn't it?
Which
so that
isn't
could
helpful.
be, hence
That's
maybe
a
why
barrier.
earlier you said you're not, I think you mentioned earlier you're not a team player so much.
I am if people play to my rules.
Okay.
Brutally honest.
So I think well, you're obviously already aware of it.
And it frustrates. It really does frustrate. Because
Have you ever been transparent about it, knowing this? Have you ever put it on the table and said to people, look, just want to warn you, this is what I'm like? No?
No, because I'm introverted and I've got too many barriers up, haven't I?
Yeah. I wonder what...
I think that would be well received. Well, I might not get the project management role full stop. I might say, oh, well, actually, we'll have somebody who's a bit more flexible.
This is maybe where your introversion maybe sometimes might, in conjunction with this, might not do you any favours, because it's a completely closed book then, isn't it? That there is this kind of stubbornness, you know, what for another word, that I think you've admitted yourself, or inflexibility.
Self-preservation, stubbornness.
And then if you're not communicating how you are, it could come across as really closed.
But of course, in my head, I've already done it. I've already been there. I've already solved it. Yeah. So that's the challenge: is to remember that actually, not necessarily everybody else has kind of got there yet. Whereas I'm already there. I'm already on to the next thing.
Yes.
Which isn't really very helpful, is it?
It's interesting, isn't it, with it all? Just something that occurred to me as well. Is there a consequence for you where you're so good at planning your time, being methodical, scheduled, early starting, planful, systematic, that means almost all the bits of time are allocated because it's all been considered and put in a plan, that actually that almost exasperates the risk that something might come in at a tangent and need to be fitted in?
Yes.
So in a really kind of obscure way, the fact that you're so good at planning can almost work against you sometimes. So that's quite interesting, isn't it?
But I will plan my way out of it if something does come in. But so I instantly go into plan mode, and it's like, okay, right, that's happened. Right now we're into contingency, maybe contingency plan 2 or 3 or whatever. So I'm constantly reevaluating it. It's just kind of how the brain seems to, create patterns around it. Really. So rather than seeing it as an opportunity, it's just a means of then going back into the planful mode, really, just to get itinerary 2 or 3 or 4.
Okay, let's move on. There's just some summaries we can go through now, which is usually really interesting because it compares your results to a norm group of other INTJs. Anything else on any of those pairs or facets that we've talked about? What kind of signposts would you bring with you now? Things that you've maybe tagged and thought, I maybe need to think about that a bit more.
I think my openness to sharing how I'm going to do stuff.
That could be a real catalyst for improvement, actually, couldn't it?
I think it would certainly help professional and personal relationships. But I think being INTJ, I'm going to be very selective over those. I wouldn't be doing it with everybody. It'll only be a certain select few, just because of
I guess
priorities again, isn't it?
The key people, if you want results and you want and you're results orientated, so it would be interesting to play around with that to see whether you get better results because of being that bit more open about your transparency and how you behave and okay. So with this report, and I'm not going to go into loads of detail because you can have a read of this later, but it actually gives you some enhancements, ways that you can improve and learn to further mature your preferences and your behaviours. So there's several topics. So this page is all about communicating. So all aspects of your type influence how you communicate, especially as part of a team. 9 of the facets are particularly relevant to communication. So what they've done is they've actually plucked some of the facets from different pages here. So they've actually amalgamated some from your EI pairing, so your I, and other ones from logical, being tough down here. So this is an amalgamation, if you see what I mean, from some of these scales. Because Myers-Briggs have identified that communication is involving how you make decisions and your energy, certain elements all brought together. So in addition to the tips in the table, keep in mind that communication for every type includes telling others what kind of information you need, asking others what they need, monitoring your impatience with other style when other styles dominate, realising that others are probably not trying to annoy you when they use their own communication styles. But it's this column here really. So if I show the camera, we've got This is all about communication, and we've got the different facets which have been brought from what we've just gone through, an amalgamation of them. Communication style, and then enhancement. So this is Neil's existing communication style, but how this could be improved. So things we've got down here: consider that sometimes the task may be better done when people know one another first. So there may be an opportunity.
Introducing small talk and team building at the start rather than just straight into task.
Yeah, which I guess you've learnt with your training.
I have, but I'd still rather get straight into task.
But I do notice that you do that. When I've seen, I've seen you deliver some of your workshops, so that's good. Contained, recognise when it's really important to say how you feel and then speak accordingly. So obviously that, because of the F against the T, that wouldn't be a natural preference probably for you. Pay attention to the style of those with whom you're interacting and try to match that style. So I know earlier you said it could be used manipulatively. It could. I think we're all in the hope that when we deliver this, we talk about actually recognising the benefits and skills and qualities in all types, and matching that interaction. So being accommodating, which you've already got that mid-zone score for, which is good. So we've also got down here, pay attention to the style. We just did that one. Be aware that others will think you are uninterested. Selectively let people know what really interests you. So kind of a bit linked to what we were saying earlier.
So it's letting those barriers down, really.
Because you'll get more from people by doing that. Be open to the important details that you may be ignoring. Earlier on one of your facets, I noticed it was saying, because you want to reach that end result, results orientation, sometimes there may be the tendency to miss some detail along the way.
Yes, my very first boss in my very first job said, "You're so good at the black and white, don't forget the grey."
Yeah, that's a good
She worked me out, didn't she?
Yeah, that's really good.
So obviously I was like it then, so it is a preference.
Choose carefully when you need to agree or when you need to ask questions. That was on the questioning accommodating mid-zone, actually, so that was on the one we talked about. So you may, in a need for harmony, you may find that you agree too much, or you may not, but or it could be that you ask more questions. Now you're quite good at listening, so maybe that's something you think you've already got down to a T. Recognise that others may mistake your critiquing for personal criticism, and be clear when this is not your intent. So again, you're so clear on that tough-mindedness with your logic. You could be transparent before you say it and say, look, what I'm about to say, I don't want you to feel that it's personal. Actually, I'm just able to set myself aside and really see this clearly in an objective manner. So I'm hoping this will be helpful, but please don't take it personally. Be interesting, wouldn't it? It's a very different
Can I
way
also say, I feel X, Y, Z rather than I think X, Y, Z, because everybody knows I'm going to be thinking X, Y, Z.
So
but if I say I feel it, that'll bring in a different
because that's one of the ways
it.
that as practitioners we recognise people is logical people often use the word think, very rarely feel, whereas feeling people use feel all the time. Yeah, so you can dip into that other zone. Be aware that sometimes your way of moving ahead may be wrong for the situation because there's such a desire for you to move ahead quickly. Maybe take
the communication style. Embody the phrase, let's get on with it. Yeah.
You can recognise.
Yeah, I want results. I want to see the end thing.
Be tolerant of others who plunge in without identifying steps. That's
reining them back. Yep, those planful people. No, not planning.
Not planning. Because what
you'd
you'd be doing is identifying the steps in their order before starting a task. But they may want to actually plunge in. So I think actually that common column there for everything I'm going to show you now is really useful as self-development. So we've got a similar one for making decisions as well. So effective decisions require gathering information from a variety of perspectives and applying sound methods of evaluating that information. The step 2 facets give us specific ways to enhance our decision making, especially those facets related to sensing, intuition, thinking and feeling. Below are general questions associated with those facets. The facet poles you prefer are in bold italics. If you are in the mid-zone, neither pole is italicised. So for intuition, abstract, what else could this mean? You could ask that. So that you already prefer, you're quite good at that. But imaginative, what else can we come up with? So you could ask that question a bit more. Conceptual, what other interesting ideas are there? Encourage more imagination.
As long as it doesn't take too much time and deflect from planning.
So you already would say, how is it all interconnected? That's a likely question you'd ask. And what is a new way to do this, possibly, or a better way?
Because that's the efficiency, it's actually looking at the efficiency again.
That was for intuition and collecting data, but on actually making the decision, the thinking, you already would logically kind of ask, what are the pros and cons? You'd be tending to say, what are the logical consequences? But what you might want to do more is questioning, but what about, just in general, but what about? Critical, what is wrong with this? And tough, why aren't we following through now? I can imagine you probably ask that quite a bit, and you already are doing those.
And if I don't express that, that becomes quite frustrating.
Okay.
So when I've tried not to actually cover that with individuals or with teams, I feel frustrated.
So it's important that you do express that, I think, but maybe within a framework of people understanding why you need to express it. So your style is logical and reasonable. This style means that you probably trust the thinking preference and readily make decisions based on logical analysis of data. You may recognise the impact of your decisions on people and relationships, but see that as secondary.
Yep.
Focus on accuracy to achieve a good decision. Are seen as precise, objective and confident, are sometimes seen as inflexible, which I think you recognised yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So tips down here, similar as to the other one, you could look at these for further development. In individual problem solving, start by asking all the questions in the boxes above. Pay careful attention to the answers. The questions that are opposite to the ones in the bold italics may be key, since they represent perspectives you aren't likely to consider. So those are the ones that we just went through. If you're missing a perspective, make extra efforts to consider what it might add. So do you think you've used any of those tips? Do you think what kept coming through for me was asking more questions, or do you tend to not do that in meetings?
It depends on the subject. If it's a subject I feel confident about, I'll be very engaged. If it's something that's either new or I think actually I'm not really specialist in this, then I will spend naturally a lot longer just reflecting. So I'm very unlikely to kind of speak up because I'm reflecting, and then I can look a bit detached from the conversation, even though I'm actually not. I'm just trying to play catch up.
Okay.
But if it's something I know well, then it's almost like I take on a different role.
Oh, that's interesting.
I kind of move from subordinate to leader. If it's something I know really well, even though I'm not leading, I kind of put my mindset into, well, I'm ahead in this already. Feels like a bit of a race because I'm trying to play catch up a lot of the time.
So again, there could be an opportunity there for transparency with a group of people that you don't know and don't know you that well, and it's a subject you're not that familiar with. You could, for example, say, just so everyone's aware, it's not that I'm disinterested. I might look like I am, but I'm actually reflecting, and I take a bit of time to catch up when it's a new subject. So, you could just say that, for example. So then people are, I don't know, I just think it warms people to you and the situation, you're being open and honest. So it's just an idea.
Yeah.
So managing change is something that we all do and have to do in life. So this one also gives you some enhancement tips down here. Again, it's gathered facets from the different pairings. So some of them here are related back to introversion, some are related back to intuition. But we've got down here, as soon as you know your own views, talk to someone you trust and get his or her input. So that's trying to get you out of that contained box again that we keep coming back to. Consider sharing feelings with selected people outside your intimate circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
That might take some work.
Check out your inferences with some facts and data. Validate both points of view and decide which makes more sense in this circumstance.
That's where I'm trying to introduce kind of new ideas and more imaginative stuff, whereas I would naturally just go for the more realistic stuff because there's a practicality about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Recognise that people's experiences may not be explained adequately by your theory, whereas what you might usually do is put the change into a theoretical system. And
could that come across as doesn't really like to be challenged on the way of doing stuff because always thinks he's already got it right?
Yeah,
it's quite dogmatic kind of approach.
It's not inclusive, is it?
It's not inclusive.
So that's maybe an area of development there. Be selective about what changes are really worth pursuing, which is an interesting one. Whereas what you may be more entitled to do, likely to do, is embrace change for the sake of change.
Again, it's prioritising, isn't it, really?
And on toughness, will actively embrace or resist change depending on whether you agree with it. But maybe what you could do is step back and consider whether your stance will really get you what you want in the long run. I guess it's maybe that racing ahead a little bit there. Get the change done, get it done practically. Whereas actually stopping and considering.
I think certainly if I try doing any DIY stuff, that comes into play, because I'd start off with all the best intentions and stuff, and then I get about an hour into it and think, oh, let's just get this completed. And then the whole quality thing goes from there to back there. And I think that's where I fall foul of it, is there's an impatience to finishing it.
Yeah, so that's a good learning point. Planful, allow for the unexpected in your long-range plan. It will happen. So there might be that it might be good to put some space in there for the unexpected, which maybe you already do, I don't know.
But the trouble is for me, because I'm so extreme on that, that's in effect potentially dead time.
Okay.
So I want to put something into that. So it's a tricky one, and I suppose that's where, if for example a particular meeting or travel thing is cancelled for whatever reason, and then suddenly I've got a block of time which I didn't have, that feeling is so good, even though there might have been money involved, and actually I'm not going to get paid for that particular project or something.
Because you've been so good at planning all the rest of your time so tightly.
Then suddenly there's free new open bonus time, which I don't know.
Like a gift.
Yeah, maybe that is more of a gift to me than it is to lots of people because of that.
Yeah, maybe. So, final one, know that circumstances may require that carefully developed steps be changed in the moment. So, whereas, your tendency and your preference is to be very methodical, sometimes things could be changed in the moment more, so it's tapping into that perceiving element.
Would a middle ground there be almost giving somebody else the responsibility for the agenda, for the itinerary, so that I can almost relax away and say it's not mine, or is that a get out clause and actually I should take responsibility and really try and work it out?
I think, the risk in that is that you could end up just giving it to somebody else every time, and then you won't actually get to practice it yourself.
Okay.
So maybe interim, you could ask somebody else to do it and watch them, and then take it on as well.
Okay.
So there's some good development things to think about. And the final one is managing conflict, which I know we were saying you like to avoid, which is where your accommodating comes from. So we've got, be aware that trying to solve this on your own may be successful, but that others also may really need your input. So that comes back to the containment again, keeping things to yourself. Intimacy, widen your circle to include others affected. They may have something of value to contribute, so just not closing off to the normal channels. Be careful that your style of questioning does not appear confrontational. Realise that your style may upset others and try to pull back and be more accepting. So those were both, come down to the critical and toughness. Recognise that delays in implementation may be necessary to reach the goal. So although it's frustrating for you because you want to get to that end result, it actually might be part of the unravelling process.
Yes, yeah.
And the early starting, make allowances for people whom early starting is not comfortable or effective.
Okay, that's a big challenge. Or remove them from the team altogether.
I think possibly not do that.
I know.
And use this as an opportunity to develop the side.
Yes.
I think the most effective people really are the ones who truly know themselves, know their real strengths and skills and their preferences. So they're able to spend comfortable time really, really being in the areas that come natural to them, but they are not scared to explore the opposite poles and to actually practice those so that they are well equipped to really be anywhere on the dichotomy, the bandwidth, if you like. And I think when you see those people, they are the ones who really take the stage and they listen and adapt, accommodate. They are able to change the way they communicate because what they want is the result, the best result, to get the best out of everyone. So although some people could say, well, isn't that being a chameleon manipulating the situation, but as long as that is the good for all, then I think that's fine. Yeah, and it's a really good skill to have.
Leadership.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are for you to have a little think about. Those enhancements there, which is good development. There's a little bit there about how the four letters, the INTJ, work together with the dominant and tertiary that we talked about earlier. Some of the things they say here, to bring back some balance, try the following. Take more breaks in your activities when you're using these less familiar parts of your personality. So when we've talked about you trying to be more transparent in meetings with people, about connecting with people more, asking more, doing more rapport, things like that. Maybe there are some coping mechanisms or things you can do. If you know you're going to have to do a lot of that in a training event, then maybe you can somehow have more breaks or give yourself just a bit of breathing time so it supports you a bit better. And also breaking up your schedule to do things that you enjoy, using your intuition and thinking. So if maybe in a team project you're not getting enough moving forward logically, maybe you can do something very logical that will satisfy that part of you. So I think it's suggesting things that you can do to satisfy those parts of you. Yeah. So the last bit is really just something to think about as you develop in life. So when we're young, we're probably quite unaware of our preference, and then when we get into our teens and early 20s, we become more aware, we start playing around with it, we identify our dominant and auxiliary, and we hopefully get those down quite well. And then in kind of midlife, we start to be more familiar and confident with our tertiary, and then later on in life, our inferior. So interestingly, you quite often see people dipping into, for you, it would be your sensing, so the practicalities of the here and the now, so less of the conceptual stuff, the concrete data, and also the feeling, which is your inferior. So that those two, you could see yourself developing more. Your personality type is likely to develop in a natural way over your life. As people get older, many become interested in using the less familiar parts of their personality. When they are in midlife or older, INTJs often find themselves devoting more time to things that were not very appealing when they were younger. For example, they report greater pleasure in tasks that require attention to facts and details and in personal relationships. What do you think about that? Can you draw any analogies with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, and I guess it kind of comes back to the desire to explore those other things which might not necessarily be an INTJ's preference holistically. So the INTJ might well feel, actually, do you know, I'm really quite happy with the way it all kind of works out. So I think there has to be, it's almost a desire to want to do those changes. I'm not so convinced that the sensing side versus my intuition is something I really feel drawn to, but the feeling and thinking bit, definitely, that feels at the moment a more natural thing to play with, because obviously we looked at the whole thing with accommodating, and I think there are other things in there that I could play more with on the feeling side rather than thinking, just because that feels a more natural angle to go with. But the sensing...
So actually, I think earlier I said it the wrong way around. Actually, your tertiary function is the feeling, and your inferior function, so the last one that you would probably practice with, is the sensing.
Oh, right.
So that's
why. Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I just said, doesn't it? That's how it feels.
Yeah. So what you sound like you're able to do at the moment is explore with the feeling. Yeah. So, but it might come later on that you start to explore with the facts more.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, we'll see. So that's kind of natural development, if you like, and something that you might want to play around with.
And I guess all of that applies as much, if not more, in personal relationships as it does in professional relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few book references at the bottom that you can look at there. Your totally in preference is INTJ, as we know, as we've gone through. So you fitted step 2 level really well with that. When we come to look just briefly before we wrap up at the scales in a bit more detail, this is an overview of your results. So this is where Neil has got a summary of all of the 4 pairings. So this is one pairing here, E or I, S or N is the second pairing, T or F the third pairing, and J and P the fourth pairing, and then all of the facets within. And the purple bars show Neil's results. So as step 1 said, his preference was INTJ, and this is shown here. The only ones that actually come out slightly into the other side is the ones that we discussed here, questioning and accommodating, and there was realistic and imaginative, just a little one there. But otherwise it's a very clear result. So that's for you to keep as your 4-letter type from step 1 and step 2. So the little summary at the top says INTJs tend to be independent-minded, theoretical and original. They have great drive for their own ideas and purposes. They are sceptical, critical, determined and sometimes stubborn. In areas of expertise, they will develop systems to organise and carry through a project with or without help.
Yeah, that feels like home.
And then this one, I don't always share with every client, just on the basis that it's a bit more detailed, but seeing that you're logical and planful, you might quite like to see it.
Yeah.
So these are your actual scores for introversion. So you were very clear. Intuition was clear, thinking very clear, and judging very clear. So this chart here, I'll just show you for the sake of the audience. So this actually shows where Neil sits. So again, his results are the blue-grey bars. The black numbers on those bars are Neil's actual results compared to a norm group. So we can actually start to see where you sit compared to other INTJs. So it's quite interesting. So for example, you scored on reflective and active a 1. And this bar shows the comparison to other INTJs. So you were actually down this end much more. The median, or the mean rather, actually is the line in the middle. So you scored lower on that than other INTJs. Now, what's interesting is if the black numbers, your results, sit outside of the blue bar, that shows that you've scored unusually compared to INTJs. So on this one, theoretical and experiential, you scored a 5, which is the highest score, and actually that was higher than other INTJs. Similarly, with logical and reasonable and tough-minded, you've actually scored higher than the norm group of INTJs there as well. And actually, on accommodating and questioning, there were some other INTJs that scored. So that number's in the bar. So
that's interesting.
Which is interesting. And then obviously, as I think we knew for the judging scores, you scored 5 for all of them, which was actually outside and beyond what either INTJs would score. So it is quite an extreme.
It is quite extreme, isn't it?
Yeah, so it is something I think to be aware of, because with all extremes comes consequences.
Yes.
So here you've got a polarity index, and the polarity index can range from 0 to 100. It shows the consistency of your response to the online questionnaire and your facet scores within a profile. Most adults score between 50 and 65, although higher indexes are common. An index that is below 45 means that the respondent has many scores in or near the mid-zone, so they're not sure. This may be due to mature situational use of the facet, so that actually means that they might be so adept at using it that they can do both. That's what we were saying, actually you kind of want to aim to be able to do with development, or it's because they were answering the questions randomly, not really caring, or lack of self-knowledge, so they're completely unaware and weren't really sure about themselves, or ambivalence about the use of the facet, or indeed maybe they've been asked by a manager to do this and they're really not into it at all, don't get it, don't want to do it. So that's where we would ask questions. Now you're the other end of the spectrum, so 85 is a high score. Equally that's fine as well. It just shows that you're either very, very clear on what you are, so good self-awareness. It could suggest, for example, that if you were in a role, in a job where you know you have to be planful, for example, that you've gone into the questionnaire thinking, I really must come out as planful for this job because so my manager's going to see the results.
The questions and where they were leading. Yeah. No, I can promise I did answer honestly.
So, why do you think you came out so high on the polarity index?
I think intuitively, but I think intuitively I do feel quite extreme in some of these things. Yeah, I mean, particularly the judging and perceiving side, that is who I am. So it feels really comfortable to be right on the limit there. I don't think, again, as you say, it comes with consequences, so I don't think it's particularly great being there, and I can see the benefits and the enjoyment of being a little bit more central, a little bit more mid-zone, but that's not me, and I would be lying if I said, oh yeah, I could sometimes do that. I don't. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So I think going forward for you, what would be the main learning points from having the MBTI done? Obviously a lot of it you were probably already aware of, but I think it's reconfirmed where you are in relation to other INTJs, so you're actually still very clear compared to the average INTJ.
Yeah, and I think for me, well, I think it's really insightful. I mean, this is obviously the first time I've seen all these numbers and all these different positions, really, and this level of detail is so much more useful than the level 1, which was interesting, but it just kind of confirmed what I knew. There's been some things in here which I think actually genuinely I could really use, literally from the minute I leave the room. And I think for me the two things, and they're kind of intertwined, the two things that really come out is that if I'm very aware of how I'm being and what my preferences are, then I can control, or at least play with some of the ways I am when I'm around people, to maybe give them a little bit more. But at the same time, and this is the second thing, is I need to be very aware of who they are and what they need and what they want. Because those two things, it's like, for me, it's like a big circle. You know, I give you a little bit, you give me a little bit. I show you something, you're going to show me back. And of course, the benefit then comes full circle to both of us. So I think that's my big learning, is now I've got 2 or 3 things that I can focus on to enable me to do that, which at level 1, I was kind of aware of it, but I didn't have this level of granularity, which now I've got, which allows me to really go away and play with them.
And I think the advantage for you is because you're so results orientated and focusing on getting.
I'm going to create a plan around
so
this.
that you create a plan around it, and as you said, you know, the motivation is that you want to get results. Whether people realise that or not maybe doesn't matter, but actually therefore it gives you a reason, doesn't it, to become a bit more open, to maybe approach people or be transparent about how you work and how you may come across, so they, you know, they're more willing to work with you and open up and offer things. So, you know, then you'll get the result you want, so actually you'll get more efficiency. So yeah, that's good. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
No, I think that was really interesting.
There's further
Thank
reading at the
much.
back, and you can take these away to keep and have a look at. And yeah, any questions, just let me know.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.